Of course, some of the big media news that took place in recent weeks is Don Lemon, who was supposed to make a return to X after Elon Musk had went on about wanting left voices to join the platform. He had asked for both Don Lemon and Rachel Maddow in a tweet to join the platform. Don Lemon, it seemed, had accepted his offer, and as part of his inaugural debut episode, was set to interview X CEO Elon Musk. The interview went forward, but then after the interview was over, Don Lemon supposedly was told by Musk's representatives that the contract had been terminated. And joining me now to discuss it all is Don Lemon. Don, thanks so much for making the time.
Hey, Wyatt, I'm so happy to be here. Of course.
Of course. So, I watched the whole interview in its entirety. And at times it seemed as if he was uncomfortable just by your line of questioning. But what, from your perspective, did you do that he wasn't already anticipating when you committed to joining the platform?
I'm not quite sure because I thought that was the reason he wanted me to join the platform is to hear from different voices, right? He said he wanted voices on the left or what have you. As you saw why during the interview, I didn't take offense. I just questioned him about why he thought I was on the left, but that's a whole other thing. So he said he wanted different perspectives on the network. Tucker Carlson was right. He thought I was left. As he said in the original tweet that you saw, you'll have full support, right? You'll have my full support and bring it to the platform. And he said no paperwork or whatever legal docs required. Well, I brought my voice to the platform, and he did not like, I guess, freedom of speech. He didn't like my questioning, so he canceled the contract.
And what do you think he was expecting as it relates to the interview specifically? Because your line of questioning, it covered a wide variety of different topics, everything from Donald Trump to, his more personal side. What was it like, I guess, after the interview was over, after the interview was concluded? Did you get a sense that, he is, not going to like the final product once it is published, or what was that kind of dynamic like?
Yeah, I did because if you saw the interview, basically he kind of walked out. I think he just stood up and I said thank you, and he just kind of took the microphone off and walked away and didn't say anything. Didn't really say thank you or anything. But I could tell he was increasingly tense towards the end. Again, I'm not exactly sure why, because the whole point of it was to have people from different perspectives and to see someone like him and someone like me who have different worldviews coming together and having a conversation. I thought it was illustrative. It could show people how to do it, especially with how discourse has evolved, especially over the last decade or so in this country. But that didn't happen. As you know, Wyatt, I'm a journalist. I had to ask him certain questions, and he just took offense to some of it.
And you bring up that point as well, which I find fairly interesting because, he obviously, with some of the other interviews that he's done, is applauded in every respect and, doesn't necessarily get held accountable. And not just him, but, a lot of people in his positions, do selective media hits to organizations that would, be friendly. And so I'm curious about your launch of your new show, The Don Lemon Show, which is still going to air on X. It's just some of the exclusive components of it I know have obviously now, stopped and are not going to be going forward. But what do you make of what your show is going to be able to bring to a platform like X or YouTube? And I guess just, the independent media side of things. And you are obviously, when you launched this, and I saw another interview you did where you were talking a little bit about how the independent media space is primarily occupied by right-wing voices. You mentioned Tucker Carlson, so perhaps just speak about that.
Well, I'll get to share and longer and more in-depth interviews, and really I'll just get to hear from people for a longer period of time than I did on cable news, where I had to rush to the commercial breaks. We don't have to do that here in streaming, as you know. And so I think you get to know people a little bit more, actually a lot more, which was what I thought would happen on X. But that's what you're going to get you'll get what you've always gotten from me, which is I'm going to be real. I'm not going to pull any punches. I'm going to do what a journalist is supposed to do. And it's going to be a conversation because I think more than anything, I'm a conversationalist. And so that's what I would like. I would like people to get to really know about my subjects as if they are sitting around talking to someone in a bar or at a diner or just in an informal setting.
And I mean, I think that's a rather interesting point because, of course, the interview with Elon Musk, you mentioned you had to hold him accountable in certain parts of the interview, but at the same time, there was still parts of the interview where it did just feel like kind of a conversation. So perhaps speak a little bit more about that just before we conclude here, about how you plan to kind of utilize that conversational aspect of things. Whereas anytime I know what you're talking about, anytime I've done a segment on cable news, it's like 3-4 minutes, it's over. You have maybe
Right.
2 or 3 questions. So what are you, hoping to get out of that aspect?
Well, I'm hoping to foster better dialogue in the country. I'm hoping that I can somehow help people or teach people to really learn to talk to each other. Listen, Wyatt, not only in this country, in the world, because you can get the content everywhere. We are more alike than we are not alike, right? Um, and I think that we should start sitting down and talking with each other and not at each other. The One of the things that was so disappointing about that interview is I felt like we were talking over each other's heads. I kept trying to engage and say, "Hey, I'm having a conversation," and even when there were points of agreement, it just went over his head. So I don't want that to happen. I have had several conversations on the show. Some of them will air. You'll get to see that later, where the guests and I go at it. And then afterwards, they're like, "Hey, Don, it was a pleasure. I'll see you next time I'm on the show." And that's how it should be. I always said when I was in cable news that no one ever wins a cable news argument. It just continues. So my motto for this show is the conversation doesn't stop because the cameras stop rolling. And so I hope that it will foster conversation and better discourse in the world.
All right. Well, certainly a lot to watch, and we'll all be watching. Don Lemon, thanks so much for taking the time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Why? Thank you so much. You be well, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks so much.
I'll be watching.